Everybody, and welcome back to the Office Freedom Podcast, Flex with Richard Smith. In today's episode, I am interviewing Suzan Dixon, the head of real estate at Standard Chartered Bank. Good afternoon, Suzan. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you for having me, Richard. It's really a privilege to be able to have this discussion with you and really get a better understanding on the flex setup now.
We're still in the pandemic, but we're learning to live with COVID. So, bearing that in mind and how important it is for companies to be flexible, agile, and hybrid, how are Standard Chartered incorporating flexibility into your portfolio?
I mean, interesting question. The way we positioned, so when the pandemic struck, I mean, the big positive, it was kind of a silver lining. We did not sit and wait and say, okay, what do we do now? But what we did was really assess the situation. We've given our employees a choice. So they have a choice of working from home, from the office, or what we call a new office, which is our flex solution.
Right.
But we've given them 3 options, and it's really a choice for them to choose as to where they want to be.
Yes.
The difference now is there's so much variety, and that's where the flex comes in to help us to, first of all, enable better experience, but also at the same time to look at how we'll right-size our space and really keep what we want and flex into, whenever there's a growth or there's a spurt when we need literally everybody to be on site. So we are just kind of playing with that. And there are so many opportunities around wellness and connections. I think that really flex really provide that option. So we are kind of watching and seeing how we can learn from that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned wellness. I mean, we've all been through a difficult 2 years. Everyone in our own way has struggled. And I think going forward, there will be definitely an outpouring of emotion that people don't even realise they're feeling right now. I think as companies invite their teams to return to the office, even in a hybrid way, but there will be a return to the office. We can see it's happening now. They do need to be very mindful of the fact of providing them with a nice experience at the office. And I think that's where Flex, one of the reasons why Flex has really accelerated, because as well as the office space, you've obviously got the communal spaces, the breakout spaces, the event spaces, the meeting rooms. Some have libraries, some have gyms. It's a whole habitat of existence. And I know that you've actually got something amazing here that I just walked through, but it's your main headquarters, but not everyone can actually have that in their own spaces. So to be able to actually, utilise that in these buildings is a massive factor.
And again, in terms of this offering it's much more, right? It's a lifestyle choice now. It's no longer, it's an employer's market. It's an employee's market, and that's where the great resignation and stuff is going on.
Yeah.
But the reality is when you have that choices, the variety of options, whether it's, the yogas or shower facilities, but all the add-ons, that creates the experience where people want to be. So they know that there is a life choice where, they have a lifestyle at home, the way they set it up. They want to be in the office because they're getting that options. And when I say office, it could be near home or the office in general. But that is something that is a must now. Otherwise, it'll be hard to succeed.
Yeah, you mentioned that about closer to home. The whole hub and spoke model has definitely come into fruition as a result of COVID. There's lots more flexible solutions in suburban areas, as well as the central main hub areas.
And it comes down to the point, right? The leasing. I mean, it is cumbersome. You can't get out of it unless you have the opportunity to exit. It bogs you down more like it. And companies are seeing that as an opportunity. Why have this extra overheads when we can right size based on what we need and still be very productive? So I think companies are seeing that for sure. And we are seeing that with landlords also. We are seeing that the mindset is shifting. It's no longer, I can't have serviced offices. It's moving. So I think there's definitely a shift. And yes, unfortunately or fortunately, COVID has been the silver lining. So I think there's massive opportunity going forward.
Yeah, you mentioned about leasing. Sometimes it's not entirely obvious to many clients, SMEs and startups entering the marketplace, and some corporations that the total occupancy costs that you, but if you bear all of that in mind, and then when you compare that in terms of the finances to leasing, then it's a lot more comparable. But if you compare the square foot of the actual office, for example, the one that we're in, ours is about £200 a square foot, but that's for the actual office we're in. It doesn't incorporate or take into account all of the thousands of square feet available in the building that we have access to. And
the experience.
Yeah. Oh, the experience is so important, and costs like the fit out, the reinstatement, dilapidations,
the whole thing.
By the time and that's why we're seeing a lot more larger transactions, not just the small transactions. I personally believe that the flex market can be a solution for any size of requirement. But I was going to ask you, like, what do you think? They say that by 2030, they think about 30% of the world's offices would be flex. I mean, how far do you think it can go?
I mean, it's just the start of a revolution, right? So again, when I said that we've been, waiting and watching, we did, right? But saying that before COVID happened, we were using flex offices.
Yes.
We were using it quite extensively. I mean, in terms of this space where you're currently sitting, when we upgraded the space, we used flex as swing space. So we've had opportunities to really use it extensively before. There were some interesting challenges then. Obviously, we were not engaged with you at that time, but the challenges were more around the lines where, I don't know, getting in the internet connection. Because we're a bank, we have to have our secure connections.
The model that we evolved into, I like to call it a supermodel. Everybody likes a supermodel.
Why not?
Exactly. And the idea is that we get a call from a client, we take the brief, okay, based on that brief in that city, anywhere in the world, we will come up with a short list of options. I mean, in some cities like New York or London, there's 1,000 serviced offices in each one. It's impossible to find a solution. It's like finding a needle in a haystack if you go independently. So we take the brief, we create a short list of options that we recommend. We then arrange tours of those spaces, and then once the client has toured the spaces and decided which office they want to go for, we will then, what I call, put on our tenant representation hat on and start negotiating the price on their behalf. And I think it's quite good that there's a buffer between you and the end user, because sometimes we're a bit cheeky, and it's quite nice for you to have someone else doing that on your behalf. And we really do max out on the negotiations.
The good cop, bad cop.
Exactly. It's very important to us what you pay, and we want to make sure you get the absolute best deal. And it works very well. And at the end of that service, believe it or not, as you know, there's no fee to you. We actually get paid by the provider. And so the model is absolutely seamless and perfect for the end user.
It really does work for us. And like you said, right, a needle in a haystack. So when I gave the example of Paris, now our office manager went out and tried to figure out, now that's not her main job. The job is really managing the office.
Yeah.
But she went out, and there are limited options there. But having somebody like Office Freedom, it kind of helps navigate through. And like you said, good cop, bad cop. So it really helps us stay focused on what we want to do, while the professional like you really come in and help us navigate. But it's interesting because I know that it is zero cost to us. I just wanted to, it'll be good for you to elaborate more. What does that mean? How does that work for you? Because we don't see that. I mean, the benefit for us is we are not having a deal, with you to get this as the best deal. So it's really between you and the provider.
Yes.
So how does this work? If you could tell me more, because I'm really keen to know more.
Well, basically, we have 15,000 locations on our website. We have on our platform in 1,000 cities, in about 150 countries across 6 continents. It's pretty much an aggregated platform of all the world's providers, enabling the end users like yourself to cover the search in one call and have some peace of mind to know that they're not going to miss out on something that we don't list, because it's pretty much all of them. So what's really important to us is independence and impartiality. It always, we've had scenarios before where we've been offered exclusives from the providers, and we always want to be independent, because therefore that enables us to be totally impartial with you when we've given you our recommendations. And as you say, there's no fee. We have the same fee arrangement with basically it's a standard 10% fee that we get from the providers There's an industry standard fee. That's how the surveyors, the chartered surveyors work, the office agency work. It's 10% across the board worldwide. But it is true that the better deal I negotiate for you, the lower our fee, which is a bit bizarre, but that's not in my mind. I would much rather have a lower fee and do a good job and have a ongoing repeat business, global relationship with you.
I mean, I'm glad you said that, because for us as a company, the added advantage is not just navigating through, right? What you do great, Richard, is the fact that you negotiate for us, but also negotiate the best clauses.
Yeah.
More often than not, like I said, if an office manager or somebody who's not really used to the location or to what service to offices or the solutions are, we won't necessarily look into that. So, as an example, in one space when we were exiting, we got a terrible bill as to, okay, this is dilapidations, and there was no discussions of that. Nobody knew that. We hadn't, funded or planned for it. So it was quite an interesting experience. But obviously now with you being involved, you're obviously taking that angle where you're negotiating for us. It makes our legal team's life easier because they are really looking at, okay, yeah, this is covered, let's move here, right? So it definitely makes it much more easier for us. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure, and I really do mean it's a pleasure. I get job satisfaction out of it. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I guess the big, again, advantage is, as a global organization, we are based all around the world. We've been engaged with you now for, 2 years?
Yes.
Mainly in Europe and Americas, because that is a region I'm responsible for.
Course.
But more importantly, you've kind of done stuff like we wouldn't expect it, right? And I'm sure you wouldn't do it for everybody, but it's really nice to know that we are really taken care of. I mean, for example, I just remember the whole bit where we started talking about it, and I got you in contact with our teams in Americas, and we were looking for space in San Francisco. You literally had your team fly in to give us a real personal service.
Yeah.
The same I remember seeing when we had this whole requirements for Tampa, and I think they're still discussing that. Again, same setup. Washington, you made that happen. In Brussels, when we recently got our deal through, you literally took a train yourself and went there, right? So I think that personal touch, it really helps the cause. Our end users, I mean, we within property, we don't need to be involved because we know that there's a connection. We leave you in the hands with our stakeholders. They know that you are coming on ground, so there is this whole bit where there's a piece of, there's an element where everybody's aware of how is this going to be handled. I mean, sometimes it's that whole bit where you're really excited, you really love the space, but having you involved, we know we can kind of mask that because the provider could take advantage. So I think there's so much of benefits in how your approach to the businesses and how you support businesses like us.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you mentioning that. The irony of those, what I call the extra mile touches, is the fact that the model that we've created enables us to broker transactions anywhere in the world, from anywhere in the world. I mean, I could be in Timbuktu and broker a transaction for you in Sydney. And the way we can do that is because we've aggregated these relationships with the providers all around the world. So even if you said to me, Richard, sorry, I haven't given you much notice, but one of my guys is landing in Sydney in 3 days' time. They want to tour some of the best offices in the area. Can you set it up? The model, like a cookie cutter that we can reproduce anywhere, is the same. So we would take the brief, do the shortlist, create the tours, and because we know the providers in Australia and everywhere else, we can make it happen. And without physically being there. And that's the clever bit, because all the service providers have people in-house available to do viewings and tours at short notice.
And I think the icing on the cake is really that match, right? Because we have clientele and our staff which have very high expectations of space. Now, sitting here, I not necessarily can say this is what you'll get in Paris, but you all know the market, so you all know what our standards are, and you all make that match happen. So it just makes, again, it easier on us and our end stakeholders.
Yeah, and you touched before on the license agreements. I mean, that's something that I introduced relatively recently in the last year or two, which is definitely not standard. I mean, by no means are we ever going to tell anybody that we are legally qualified. Obviously, we're not legally qualified. We're property guys. But we've been in it so long, and a lot of my team members have used to work on the other side with flex providers, so we know our way around a license agreement. And if I see some clauses that I think should be edited or removed, I'm going to work my hardest to get them edited and removed. I won't always succeed in all of them, obviously, but as long as you know we're trying and we do care about that level of detail.
Yeah, and I think the benefit is you keep it very transparent, right? You know what's going on versus suddenly a surprise.
Yeah.
So I think that again helps that element of confidence.
Yeah. Susan, so as you know, our main model is to help source and negotiate and find space, but we can also assist sometimes with surplus space. So do you have occasionally surplus space within your portfolio?
I mean, good question, right? So, like I said, twice the experience, half the space. That's not just a tagline. We are really looking at it hard of how we make that happen. So what we are doing, we are really looking at right-sizing our spaces and taking the opportunity where it exists, where we can exit, but where we can't, we are really seeing how do we make that space work. So we ideally would like to partner with the likes of flex providers, and this is, again, throughout the portfolio. But it's really a great opportunity to, again, work along y'all, because y'all make that kind of things happen. I mean, we are obviously early days, we are working through it, but it's a different angle, because it's not just flex spaces. How do you create that flex space within the environment that you have as surplus space, and then flex into it if there's a need? So that's definitely a model we're looking at.
And so if you have surplus spaces, we can communicate with the providers we know in that area, whether it's US, UK, Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia, Australia,
around the world.
Exactly, around the world. And we can talk to them about looking at your surplus space and then seeing whether or not, first of all, the space has physically got to lend itself to being a flex solution. Natural light being obviously very important, and the shape of it, the more rectangular, the better, the less square. It's better to be not completely square, because obviously in the middle you have more dead space without light. But sometimes they can create those types of spaces into meeting rooms and breakout spaces. So having the flex providers come and have a look at your space and think, right, if it works, and B, we can talk to them about negotiating like a management agreement, to work on your behalf. That way you can generate some revenue from space. You may even have mothballed some space, but to have some revenue coming in from those buildings would be a nice surprise, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to working with you on that kind of solutions, because it's what we want to do.
The flexible, agile, hybrid solution about working is on everyone's lips, not just in the property world, but every single company in the world is talking about how they're going to return to the office. And I feel that the flex market is the perfect blanket to catch people as they return to the office. And I think that it's only going to go very, very in a northerly direction. And I think in a few years' time, the whole concept of flex versus leasing will be an even more interesting conversation, because I personally believe that flex can accommodate any size requirement. Even if you wanted to accommodate 500 or 1,000 people, yes, you might not be able to walk in to existing inventory and take your pick, but we can, the relationship that we've got with various providers around the world, they can go and take a lease, the traditional lease on the space. Let them take the headache of the full repairing.
There's a commitment coming in.
And
right?
insurance, full repairing, insuring liability, and the fit out and the delapse. And let them then come and create something bespoke and customised back to you on what we call a managed type transaction. Which again, when you look at the economics of it, it often makes it a viable proposition. So
less headaches for the business.
Yeah, less headaches for the business. So I think that, bearing in mind that flex can probably accommodate any size requirement, I think it's an industry that is only going to go very, 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 very far forward. And I personally still get a lot of job satisfaction out of it. So I'm really here for the long haul, and I'm looking forward to it. And I'm especially looking forward to working with you and your colleagues at Standard Chartered Bank around the world for all of your flex requirements.
Good to hear. It's definitely a great relationship. Thank you for that.
Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did, and we'll see you next time.